Hi, I'm Shari. For a long time, your only options were burial or cremation, fire cremation to be specific. But people started looking at the implications of first traditional burial. And as you can see from this list of all the resources that are used, either the quantity or the toxicity of these substances, what we're doing is either wasting a lot of resources or burying toxins into the ground, and it could leach and have negative repercussions for plant life as well as drinking water, et cetera. So people are starting to rethink whether they want to do a traditional burial because we're really creating underground landfills. So for that reason, and also burial land is declining, especially in urban areas. There's not the availability of a lot of acreage to bury bodies. Even in Arlington National Cemetery, they're doing some expansion, but they say they're going to max out, I think it's in 2060. So something has to be done, and that spurred green burial. Next slide, please. What is green burial? As you see, it is a combination of practices within the funeral home as well as the ultimate burial. It has to do with caring for the dead with a minimal environmental impact and also preserving natural resources and taking care of the workers, and it gets into pesticides, et cetera. But there is an organization that's a wealth of information about green burial. If you want to know more, it's the greenburialcouncil.org. And they act somewhat as a good housekeeping seal of approval, because there's a lot of cemeteries out there that'll say they're green cemeteries, but they haven't been certified by the Green Burial Council. It's questionable. So I would say if you want more information, go to the Green Burial Council. Next slide. So what does it mean if you opt for green burial? First of all, it impacts the caskets or containers that you're buried in. As you see here, the top right is just a shroud. It's from pea silk, so that's biodegradable. All these materials are more biodegradable than the wood you see with the high sheen. That means there's varnish, which means there's formaldehyde, metal trim, all that. No. On the left, you see a plain pine box, no trim, nothing that is not going to be biodegradable. On the right, you see a coffin that is of, I think that's willow or seagrass. So, you know, you're not sacrificing aesthetics, but you are helping the environment if you make these choices. Next slide, please. As I said, some of it impacts of being green, impacts what the funeral home does, which also means, just before we go to cemeteries, as far as embalming, where there are a lot of toxins, you don't have to be embalmed unless there's going to be a viewing. And if there is, so therefore you want to be embalmed, there are less toxic formulas that you could request. So if you've planned in advance and have time to do your research, you could find out who is adhering to the practices that make you comfortable and align with your values. So again, now getting back to the cemeteries, as you would see on the Green Burial Council site, there's different levels. They have hybrid, where a section is devoted to green. They have natural, which I believe is on the left, and then on the right is conservative, where there's land conservation regulations, et cetera. I'm not going to go into it here, but they have different levels of certification. But what's common is you don't see any markers, upright headstones, et cetera. This has a flat marker. The one on the right, it's just, you blend into nature. And I think the way, if your family wants to visit, there'll be GPS information that they would use to be able to find exactly where you're buried. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, go back one. that wasn't good. The other thing about green burial is, in addition to the cemeteries, there are other methods that you could opt for, but you know, it's a very personal decision. There's something called body farms, and it's not as radical as it sounds. They're generally forensic anthropology programs that are affiliated with universities that observe decomposing bodies in different states and different settings, weather conditions, etc. So there's about 7 of them, as I said, affiliated with different universities. Another whole body green burial option is to be buried at sea. It's not very common, but it is legal. I think you have to go out 3 nautical miles or something like that. I know there's a company in California that does it. In fact, if you're on Facebook, if you go to My Great Goodbyes Facebook page, I just posted the other day an article about some people who wanted that option. And one of the considerations was that being part of the ocean, they would eventually evaporate and be a raindrop or whatever. As I said, it's very personal. This is all very personal, as it should be. Okay, next. So as I said, so that was green burial, but another popular death care option these days is cremation. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And one is because people do think that it's more environmentally friendly. But look at the statistics. In 2020, it's 56+%. That's the last reported statistic. I think in 2019 is where it actually crossed more than 50% of American adults are being cremated. And it's projected to be 65% plus by 2025. Now, that's the national average. In some states, it's already higher, like Las Vegas, it's over 80%. And I think same for Hawaii, because where there's scarce land, people are looking for other options, and that's cremation. The other thing that, if you want to go to the next page, slide, Tom, is that it's practical because it can be less expensive. If you do a direct cremation, it can be less expensive than a burial. As we discussed, there's shrinking cemetery space, and people think that if you're not using land just to bury bodies, that that's more environmentally friendly. On a personal note, the decision is also being affected by the fact that a lot of people are not as affiliated with organized religions anymore. So the religions, and I'll talk to you about it in a bit, some of the religions forbid cremation, but if you're not being driven by religious considerations anymore, it opens the door for cremation. Another reason that it's increasing in popularity is our mobile society. Think about it. You're on the East Coast, your kids move to the West Coast. Are they going to come east just to visit your buried body? I don't know. But if you're cremated, they can take you with you. If you have multiple kids, they could split it, or wherever they are, you know, your ashes, and keep it on their mantle or whatever they choose. So mobile society is playing into the trend, as are changing attitudes. You know, baby boomers are driving a lot of this new reimagining death, reimagining aging. It's not surprising. So baby boomers have seen nice ceremonies or just other options that are more in alignment with what they care about. And it's opened the door for cremation as well. And then there's the whole idea of flexibility. As I said, you could split the ashes between multiple kids. I'm not going to get into it here, but there are things that people are doing with ashes, everything from turning it into diamonds to pottery and other tributes and mementos that people feel gives them peace to have the ashes made into as an eternal remembrance of their loved one. So, and you know, a lot of people think that that would be more appealing to them. So it's all about a personal choice, and that's what they're choosing. That's fire cremation. However, in recent years, another type of cremation has become available, and it is legal in 20 states, but you have to know that something is legal may not be available. For instance, in Connecticut, this type of cremation, we're going to go to the other slide in a second, is legal, but there's no provider for it right now. That other cremation is water-based. It's called aquamation, flameless cremation, water cremation, biocremation, because it is more environmentally friendly, resumation. The scientific name is alkaline hydrolysis, and basically you put the body into a tank that's 95% water and 5% alkali, which is a substance used in a lot of personal care products. It's not dangerous or anything, and it's very gentle. It's not boiling liquid. I believe it's either 300 or 200 degrees, and that affects how long the body has to be in the tank, but it's very gentle. It's the movement of the water that really causes the decomposition as well as the alkali. And therefore, it's more environmentally friendly because you're not using fossil fuel to fire up ovens. You're just using the water and the alkaline. So you get the same bone fragments that remain and that are pulverized to make the ash. But as I said, it's how you get to it is a lot more gentle. The next slide, please, Tom. The other thing about it, that shows you the tank. It's a stainless steel tank. The other thing that's important to note is that before a body is put in for fire cremation, if that deceased has a pacemaker or any metal implants, they are often removed. The pacemaker has to be removed because the battery could explode in the heat of the oven, but it's not the case in the water. So therefore you're saving money, and the idea is a little bit more comfortable for people to know that they're not subjecting their loved one to a surgery before the process. So, and not having the surgery saves money. So it's gaining a lot of popularity because it's no fossil fuels, there's no emissions. Fire cremation, if the deceased has dental fillings, there's a lot of mercury and other toxins that are the result of burning, so that you can't have crematoriums in an urban area, et cetera. This is not the case. So it's gaining in popularity, but it's questionable when it'll be in whatever state you're in. I know for the New York, New Jersey area, right now, the best bet, and it's not even right now, will be a provider opening in Maryland. And it may be the case, as it is with a Southern provider, where they're willing to drive out of state to pick up the body. So it's potential that Maryland may at least drive into New Jersey, Southern Jersey, because it's not too far, to pick up the body, but we won't know until they open shop. So something to watch out for. Next slide, please. Okay, another option is called Natural Organic Reduction, NOR is the acronym. And I guess the shorthand is human composting. But we're not talking about leaving a body in a field like you do your vegetable scraps from your kitchen. These are vessels on the left. As you see, one is open, and that's it magnified on the right. And what you see is that the body is just put in a biodegradable type of wrapping, and it's put into the vessel atop hay and straw and soft materials, so that it lays, it's pressurized. There's some other organic material like mushrooms, etc., that speed the decomposition, and it's put in there for 30 days, and then it's taken out, and what's left is soil. So it's something that people are looking into because it's gentle, because they net something that they could do other things with, like put it around the soil, around their plants, etc. It is sometimes donated to nurseries, although I believe that there's laws that say it could only be used to nurture non-edible vegetation. But you get soil, and it's part of returning the body to nature. Right now, it's only available, though, on the West Coast. That image you saw was from the first person to really pioneer the whole technique. That's in the state of Washington. It's also available in Oregon, and I believe Colorado. It's legal and available in those 3 states. And I believe there's 3 different providers. So one gets you all the way to soil. The other, I read, it gets you to soil and bone, and then the bone has to be pulverized to make the ashes, as in other cases. But it's a little expensive, but it's got a lot of people who are interested in this. And what I would say about this, as well as the alkaline hydrolysis, which are the 2 more earth-friendly options other than green burial itself, if it's not available in your state now, you'd be wise to have a plan A and then a plan B. And since we're talking about advanced planning, it shouldn't be a problem for your plan B, because you're hoping to live many more years since you're advanced planning, but you should consider what options you would choose if, God forbid, you died tomorrow. So your plan A should go for something immediately available, but your plan B could be for when things become more available. Because when you're doing this planning anyway, you do it, you put it aside. If anything major changes it, you amend it, but that's when you would be able to do that. Next slide. Okay, so this is an image of what remains after the processes we discussed. The left is cremation, and I think this is fire cremation because it's not as white. The water cremation gets a whiter cremain, is what they call cremated remains. On the right, of course, is the soil. And again, it gives you a lot of flexibility to think of what you'd want. So the other thing you could think about is what you want done at the end with your essence, and then work backward and say, wow, if I want to be spread around a tree or something, then I can't be a whole body. So I better look into cremation or natural organic reduction. Next slide. Okay, I just wanted to pause and give you an update about what the religious rules are governing cremation, and they haven't ruled that I've seen on natural organic reduction, just fire cremation and water. Understand, though, that many of the practices associated with green burial are standard for Jewish and Muslim burials. The whole idea of not embalming, plain caskets, quick burial, that sort of thing. And the Catholic Church is moving in this direction increasingly. As far as cremation itself, though, Orthodox Jews and Muslims still forbid it. No questions, no modifications, it's forbidden. Reform and Reconstructionist Jews and Protestants and Mormons are more accepting of it. I haven't seen them say anything specifically about the water cremation. I'm talking now about fire cremation. Catholic Church recently and conservative Jews no longer forbid fire cremation. They still encourage and prefer whole body burial in a cemetery, but they recognize the trends for all the reasons I shared. It's gaining popularity. So what they say is, if that's going to be your choice, that's your option. But no scattering, no urns on the mantle. You have to bury the remains in a cemetery of your respective religion and with the ritual and prayer associated with it. And I know several rabbis who said that they would officiate at a ceremony of burying remains, cremains in a Jewish cemetery. So I thought that would be good for you to know. The only ruling about water cremation I've seen is from conservative Jewish rabbinical authority, and they look at it the same way as fire cremains. They still prefer that you do whole body burial, but if not, as long as you bury the bone fragment, they'll be okay with it. Okay, and in case you want to know, Buddhists accept it, don't mandate it, but Hindus do mandate it. Okay, so let's look at some other burial options considered alternative green burial though. On the left, you see an underwater memorial reef. And what it is that they take your cremains and they mix it with some other substance and sink it to the bottom of the ocean. And they have a whole underground area off the coast of Florida that has these memorial reefs, and it nurtures marine life. They can come in and out. It's kind of like a grotto. And if your family are scuba divers, they may think it's cool to visit you that way. They have a ceremony with the boat also. And if that resonates with you, that option is there. Another thing that people like the idea of is having their dead body nurture new growth. Well, in this case, it's not necessarily new growth, but it's nature. There's a company that has Memorial Forest, started on the West Coast. Right now, they do have one in the Berkshires and I believe Litchfield, Connecticut, and they're expanding. And so they have already established forest, so there's less chance that the tree that grows from you is going to die. It's already an established forest. And you go and you find a tree that you like. And if it doesn't already have a marker, meaning it's claimed, you give a deposit, of course, and they will put your name on it. And when the time comes, your soil or your cremains would be sprinkled around the base. And people, you know, your family would know where they could visit you. And it's a very Zen setting to go visit someone versus, you know, all the concrete headstones and all that, marble, whatever. A lot of people like this option. And like everything, the location of the tree is going to affect the price. If it's closer to the parking lot, it's a lot more expensive than if your family has to hike into the woods to find you, but you have a lot of options there.
Just on a personal note, I don't think I want my family to find me, so I'd probably go for the less expensive option.
There you go. There you go. It's a
Kidding.
win-win.
Kidding, of course. Kidding, of course.
Win-win, Tom. Next slide, please. Okay. If you want to keep your loved one close to home, or your loved one wants to keep you close to home, but you care about green, you know, we've all seen the porcelain and metal urns and whatever. There are green urns. And by the way, you could buy any of this, including the green caskets, online. And a funeral home has to use whatever casket you provide. You don't have to buy the casket from a funeral home, and it's the most expensive thing in the estimate often, so that's good to know. But as far as urns, as you see on the left, are the type where there's seeds in there. You pick what kind of tree you want to grow when it's mixed with your cremains. You could either bury it or just leave it on the windowsill. The center, I believe, is from the same company. This is for apartment dwellers. So there you could see a little sapling starting to grow. And then on the right, you see more urns that are made from natural sustainable woods, or this, a bottom one, I believe, is a gourd. So you do have options. You don't have to sacrifice aesthetics, and it's a decorative display. Okay, next, please. Okay, this is a list of greener modifications. Because admittedly, you may already have a cemetery plot and that's where you want to go, or a pre-need arrangement with a funeral home, etc. So there should be some flexibility should the whole idea of doing more to be less harmful to the environment is important to you. There are certain things you could do. You could certainly, as I said, choose a casket that's made of a different material than the high gloss woods that the funeral home may want to sell to you. And certainly if you're going to be cremated, you don't need to buy a casket. You could rent one for the funeral, and then for the cremation, use a lesser casket. Sometimes the crematoriums have one for your use as well. You could keep your ashes at home in one of those eco-friendly urns. So this way there's no digging in the ground to even bury your remains, or development of a columbarium, which are those structures you see for putting burial in various cemeteries. You could do the biodegradable sea burial, the little containers to be buried at sea. You could choose a crematorium that offer that when you buy a package from them, they'll make a donation to plant trees or something like that. You could look, Tom, if you want to go to the next slide, because the list continues of little modifications you can make. You could look for a crematorium that is more state of the art, where there's better filters that keep some of the emissions in check and filter out some of the toxins. For your hearse, you could use, request an electric vehicle or a hybrid. All these kind of things are considerations if you just want to minimize the negative impact for your burial on the earth. Next slide, please. Okay, if you responded to the invitation, then I had asked what Luke Perry and Desmond Tutu had in common. These are the green burial options they chose. On the left, Luke Perry was buried in what's known as a mushroom suit. And it was developed by someone at MIT, and it's supposed to neutralize the toxins in the body by potentially speeding up the decomposition process and enhancing the available nutrient output. So as you look at this suit, those little white looking vines are actually mushroom spore laden threading. So it's that just, you put no casket, you put the body in the ground wearing that, if the cemetery allows, because cemeteries have strict rules and it exceeds what states may mandate. They have their own rules. So do your research in advance and see if they'll let you even be buried in something like this. Although I will say Luke Perry was buried this way, but people in the green burial industry question whether it really works, what have you, but that's how he said goodbye. On the right, Desmond Tutu did opt for water cremation, and he considered himself an eco warrior, and this was in concert with his values, and that was his choice. Next slide. What it comes down to is, how do you want to be remembered? The way you live your life contributes to how people remember you, but also the way, not how you die, but how your death care is handled, how you say goodbye, from the funeral ceremony to what's done with your body and everything else that they see as part of your goodbye should be all about you, personalized, and certainly in alignment with your values. So if you want to say that taking care of the earth was an important value for you, you'll want to consider green burial. Next. Because at the end of the day, the bottom line is, the goal is to be at peace with the choices you made, no regrets, and to have peace of mind knowing that you did your best for your family, yourself, and for the planet. So I thank you again for listening.